Salutare Skipoli. This video is about Roman families and the Patria Potestas. This is a good place to start because your book, Ecce Romani, it discusses Latin using this family as their example for everything. So um, that's where we're going to start for culture. So in this image, you see a normal Roman family. It doesn't really look that much different from what our normal little family looks like in our society. Um, you'll notice, of course, the clothing differences, but nothing else really. So, a mom, a dad, as many kids as they have, and this was pretty normal for the Romans to have two or three kids. They didn't usually go crazy. In poorer families, you might see more kids generally, but this doesn't look like a poor family. If you look at that mom there, she's pretty well clothed. Um, so in a family, there's usually an arranged marriage, and it's more like a business transaction than anything for the Romans. The Romans are all about their civic duty, and in order to carry out their civic duty, they need to have good family ties. So that's what makes it more like a business transaction, that these marriages are made um, so that they can their family name can sort of progress and be better for the next generation. Um, Now the father has certain roles, and his are more, some would say more important, I guess, but he manages the money, he manages the whole estate, all their property, and he also manages all the people in the family. And when I say people, I mean his wife, his kids, his slaves, his employees, everything. He manages all of that. So he's like a big manager. Um, but the mother, she doesn't get to sit around all day. Um, she manages the household, so she makes sure everybody eats, everybody's clean, everyone is well groomed, and things like that. As you might notice, boys, they have nice short hair. Well, this guy, he went a little crazy. Girls usually have their hair in a nice bun. So these guys look pretty clean and put together, and that's the mom's deal. Another thing the mother does is teach the daughter how to do this for her own family one day, and they need to start early because the daughters, they usually get married around 15 or 16. There's usually a pretty big age difference between husband and wife. The husband is usually um, 20 or 30, if not older, when he gets married, and the woman is um, 14 to 16 or so when she gets married. Now, in addition to the mom teaching the daughter what to do, the father here needs to teach the son um, what he does all day at work, and how to, you know, grow up to do the same thing or something similar. So if the dad's a politician, it's pretty certain that the son's going to be a politician as well. Now we have in this picture a woman named Cornelia. This woman is a legendary mother. She is Roman to the Romans. She is an ideal mother, and she was the mother of the Gracchi brothers. We have Gracchus number one and Gracchus number two. Notice that I made when I talk about both of them, I call them the Gracchi. That I ending is plural for an us. So don't be thrown off by that. Gracchi is just the plural of Gracchus. And since there's two of them, we're going to call them the Gracchi. Um, Now, the Gracchi brothers, you're going to learn more about them later on in the unit, um, but they were ideal sons. So this family is sort of the model that Romans are supposed to aspire to. When these guys grow up, they are they look like this. Look at them; they're cute, aren't they? Um, and they grow up to be tribunes. And a tribune is a political office, and they're representatives for the plebeians or the common people. So they fight. the Gracchi brothers here, they fight for the rights of the poorer people in Rome. And something important to note is that the poorer people in Rome make up the vast majority of Romans. So it is pretty important to keep them happy, because if they realize that they're the majority, there could be some sort of uprising. So these Gracchi brothers, they support the common people, the plebeians, and they fight for their rights and their well-being in general. And you'll find out what happens during that fight that the Gracchi brothers put up, okay, later on. Now, let's get back to the father. Um, we talked about a marriage being like a business transaction. Well, a father and his family, they that was also a lot like a business transaction. You sort of see it here. Again, you have a father shaking the hand of his wife, well, a husband shaking the hand of his wife, showing that it's more of a business transaction, like I said. Now, I want to talk about somebody else in the Roman family, the Patria Potestas. Patria Potestas. He's a guy that is the main father for the whole extended family. He's usually the oldest guy, and therefore considered the wisest. He has control over all of his children, and this is sort of the rights of a father, and they called it the Patria Potestas. Um, the Patria Potestas literally means the powers of the the fatherland technically, but they're talking about the father as a whole, um, as a larger entity than just the guy that made some kids. He has control over his kids, control over his adult children, even when they get older, and his grandchildren. So he's got a lot of power. Um, Now, this father, the Patria Potestas, he controls everything. Now, just to clear things up, a Patria Potestas, there's technically a Patria Potestas in every household. And then there's a larger Patria Potestas that looks over multiple households. So if you can imagine, the Patria Potestas is sort of like a mob boss, the big one, the big Patria Potestas. He's like a mob boss if you've ever seen a mob movie or The Sopranos or something like that. Um, he's the guy that everybody comes to for protection and for money and for any issues that they might have. Um, but then you also have to think of a Patria Potestas as the man of the house, just one household. So um, it's like many Patria Potestas are coming to the bigger Patria and getting things that they need from him. Um, they would approve new family members by picking them up off the ground. So uh, let's think about this. The wife has the baby, and the baby is put at the father's feet. And one of his responsibilities and roles is to decide if they're going to keep the baby or not. There were lots of reasons not to keep a baby, not having the funds to care for a baby. If the baby was unhealthy or deformed, they would probably decide not to keep the baby. But if he picked up the baby, then they decided to keep him. And there was not really any discussion between the father and the mother about that. Um, okay, so I want to talk about emancipation. Maybe you've heard this word in terms of American history, but I want to talk about it in terms of family. Um, so let's talk about American uh, emancipation first. Okay, it looks kind of like this. This picture gives you a good idea where a child, an American child, wants to be disconnected from his or her parents back here. So, legally, when a child gets emancipated, they break all ties. It's like what's the word? They disown their own parents. And it's a huge legal battle. Um, and it means that a child that's under 18 is considered an adult and out on their own before they're 18. And it's not a pretty process. It's not a good decision. So please don't go home and tell your parents that you want an emancipation. Not cool. Um, so this is American emancipation. Roman emancipation is totally different, and I wanted to show you the difference. So let's look at this picture. We have the Patria Potestas here, right? He's in control of his sons. Son number one, son number two. And notice he's holding their heads in this sculpture, and that's really telling of his power over them. Now, in a Roman emancipation, the father here makes the decision to break the ties of control. Not disowning. It just means that you release your sons from his power. So that means that the sons can then go on and be their own patria in their own household. And it's a really important step. And it doesn't have to happen. These fathers, the big father, doesn't have to do this ever. And it automatically happens when they die. Okay. Now, let's talk about parental love a little bit because we're talking about all this as a business transaction, but it is important to note that there's a phrase in Latin, amor ille peritus incitos, and that means the love that's implanted deeply within, and that's what Romans would say about parenthood. So there was a sense that, you were supposed to take care of your kids and love them and enjoy their personalities and all that while still maintaining the good family name and things like that. So don't get the wrong idea about Romans. They aren't all cold-hearted. And you'll see in some stories that it's quite the opposite. Um, but the top priority of parents was a moral education. Let's think about that. Break that down. Moral meaning they're going to grow up to be good people that um, that help the Romans progress in their endeavors. Okay, so back to the civic duty thing. Um, Moral was considered doing your civic duty in the proper way. Um, and then education, learning how to be and how to act outside of just the academics. So that was their top priority as parents. Now, there is a famous father. His name is Brutus. Lucius Junius Brutus. You might have heard of another Brutus, which we'll talk about in a second. This guy, he raised two sons that grew up to not be as moral as he would have liked. So he actually, to uphold his morality, he had them killed and executed. And you can see he's over here. He doesn't like that he had to make that decision, so he's in the dark in this picture. And then the wife, she had no way to even combat this. So she just has to live with it, and so do the little sisters here. And you see the sons being carried out in this picture. This is a great painting. But it shows a little bit about the Romans there. Um, and then this Brutus, Lucius Junius Brutus, he later on in his family line comes up another Brutus that maybe you were thinking of when I said Brutus. Marcus Junius Brutus was the guy that helped kill Caesar. Um, so don't get those two confused. Be careful with them. This guy's Marcus Junius Brutus, the friend of Caesar that plotted against him. There's another important father-son relationship we want to talk about. This one's in mythology, and don't mind the nakedness. They did cover ever so nicely there. Um, this is Icarus, the guy falling here. He's actually dead. Don't look too closely at his face. It's kind of shocking. And here's his father, Daedalus. Um, and Daedalus, the father, warned him not to fly, Icarus, not to fly too close to the sun. He got burned and he died. And here's Daedalus following him down to the water. That's not a good scene, but the moral is listen to your parents and your father especially. I'm almost out of time. I only have 20 seconds left. So um, Tell me in one sentence, what do you think about a Roman father in a Roman family? That is your direction for the end. Straw out.